Hi, welcome back to this Thursday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. I want to welcome to our decision maker line a good friend of mine, Rick Deighton. He is an overseas evangelist with a ministry called World Outreach. Rick, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Good to chat with you again.
Hey, thank you, Brian. Good to hear you.
Well, it's good to have you on the program. And Rick, the reason I wanted to bring you on is I'm on your mailing list, and so I get information from you about your mission travels and some of the work that you do. And I know just recently you were in Ukraine. In fact, you were in Ukraine when everything began to collapse around you, around Crimea, around Ukraine, pressure put on by the Russian government on the country of Ukraine. Now we understand today the Crimean Parliament has put a referendum on the ballot in 10 days where the people of Crimea can vote to basically secede from Ukraine and affiliate with Russia. And you were there in Ukraine, in Crimea, if I remember correctly, when things began to collapse. And tell our folks, first of all, Rick, what you were doing in Ukraine. People might be interested to know about the spiritual hunger that exists in that country. Talk to us about what you were doing there.
Okay, I was working with two congregations in the city of Nikolaev, so I was not in Crimea. I had planned to go to Crimea later after teaching at Pavlovsky Christian Institute near Kherson. Both of those cities are north of Crimea, but in the south part of Ukraine. But I've been going to Ukraine since 2001, when I was invited to come there to speak for Man in the Christian Worldview Symposium by Sergei Golovin, who founded Christian Center for Science and Apologetics. And his ministry is centered in Simferopol, the capital city of Crimea. So I was going to Crimea first before I started going to other cities. But this trip, I was going to be teaching in several cities. So for 2 weeks, I was in the city of Nikolaev. The Ukrainian name is Mykolaiv. The Russian name Nikolaev, and I have open opportunity through several Christian teachers to be able to teach at Black Sea University, which is kind of interesting. Crimea is the peninsula end of the Black Sea. Nikolaev is on the river, the Dnieper River, but not on the Black Sea. But it's a secular university with Christian roots, and I have the opportunity to go in mostly on the English classes, but this time it opened up for more classes where I could speak in those classes and have better rapport than ever before. So I think the crisis had really opened the students' minds and hearts to be thinking about the most important questions.
So you were at a place where, I'm looking here at your newsletter, that you were actually planning to go to Crimea, and you got a call last Sunday morning, actually. You were getting ready to go when you got a call from Sergei Golovin, I guess you say his name. Or
Sergei, it's pronounced Golovin.
Golovin. He called you about 8 o'clock in the morning, and what did he tell you?
Well, actually, I had called him about another matter, and he said, "Brother, it is providential that you called because I need to talk to you." I had just a day or two before, because of his other response, he had advised me not to come to Crimea. Crimea was already becoming a very hot spot. So I was getting ready to go to the city of Kherson, just outside of Kherson, to teach at Pavlovsky Christian Institute starting Monday of this week. And then I was planning to go to Crimea after that. But he told me the latest news. And he said, "Have you heard this latest news?" And I said, "What is it?" And he said, "Russia has declared war on Ukraine. You need to get out of the country now, as soon as possible."
And I think part of his concern was that, and maybe you can comment on this, the difference in the way that maybe Russia looks at Americans and the way that maybe Ukrainians look at Americans. Is there a difference there?
Yes, there is. And at the university, I've been very well received, treated great at the Black Sea University. Other places I've taught across Ukraine, mostly even when I'm in Crimea. But then There are undercurrents in this society. I'd had some very strong anti-American sentiment a couple of times when I've been in Crimea, but it's been much heightened now.
Now, in Crimea, there's a higher percentage of the population there is ethnic Russian. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. And Crimea belonged to Russia longer than it's belonged to Ukraine. So, and Russia wants it back. My first interpreter when I went to Ukraine, and that was in the Crimean Peninsula, Vlad Devikov told me the background of this, that during the Soviet times when Nikita Khrushchev was in charge, then the Soviet Union gave Crimea to Ukraine in appreciation for all that Ukraine had done for the Soviet Union. And at that time the thinking was, Russia dominates the Soviet Union, so we can give it away and it's still ours. But then they didn't anticipate the breaking up of the Soviet Union. So legally Crimea belongs to Ukraine, but Russia wants it back, and especially because of Sevastopol is the Russian military base in the Black Sea. So it's been a point of contention for years.
Now, let me ask you this question, Rick. You spend time with the Christians in Ukraine. What's the general sense that you pick up from our brothers and sisters in Christ there in Ukraine? How are they looking at this crisis right now?
There is definitely some fear there, but also they want to be salt and light. Yuri Korshun was my interpreter at both congregations. He's the founder of the Messianic congregation, the Messianic Jewish congregation that's called Lions Gate, and then he interpreted for me at the other congregation that's with the Baptist Union. It's Christian Church of Reconciliation. He was advising the members of his congregation to limit themselves on how much news they were watching, because they could saturate their minds with so much fear that they'd be paralyzed by fear. And
now let me ask this question, Rick. Is the fear that Ukraine would come back under Russian domination, I mean, is from their standpoint, would they prefer to remain a part of an independent Ukraine?
Yes. I mean, it's divided because there are people, not only Russian, the ethnic Russians, but, the entitlement mentality becomes addictive. We see it right here in our own country. And so there is a certain amount of the people in Ukraine that would like to be under the Big Brother shelter and have everything done by the government. So we struggle with that same attitude here.
Talking here with Rick Deighton with Overseas Outreach, his trip to Ukraine, and having to leave basically under cover of darkness. You had to head out to the airport about 2 o'clock in the morning and catch a flight back to the United States. I guess a 7.5-hour drive to get to Kiev where you could fly out. So, Rick, we got just a couple minutes left. And also, I might mention, Rick is the author of a new book. The title of the book is More Than Conquerors in Cultural Clashes. More Than Conquerors in Cultural Clashes. And Rick, I'll ask you to tell us in just a second where people will get more information about that book. But Rick, based on your experience there in Ukraine, obviously you're saying that this crisis may be creating some spiritual opportunity, both in Crimea as well as in Ukraine. And so we want to be praying about that. How do you see this playing out politically? I mean, if you had to make some kind of an educated guess about how this whole thing is gonna finally resolve itself, what do you see coming?
I have to admit that I didn't expect Russia to become this aggressive. So it was peaceful in Nikolaev, and I was going to go ahead and finish out. I had 4 more weeks planned to be in Ukraine, so I didn't anticipate it happening this fast. And so now that Russia has bared her teeth, so to speak, so it's the Russian bear now is snarling and showing the claws. Boy, it's hard to predict. I'm praying very earnestly for brothers and sisters in Christ, and that under this type of pressure they will really shine, let their lights shine, and be bold witnesses for Christ. So I saw a greater heightened awareness among the students And also, there's probably never been so much prayer for the nation of Ukraine in history. So that's the positive of it. But the reality is they are under very heavy pressure. And
is your guess, Rick, talking here with Rick Deighton of Overseas Outreach, is your guess that Crimea is going to wind up back under the umbrella of Russia?
That's a possibility, and that's not where they want to go. And so there will be a bloody civil war if Russia forces that. We already saw so much violence taking place in Kiev, and 95 dead because of that. And they're not just going to give up their freedom and meekly submit to the domination by Russia in Ukraine. But on the other hand, there's a strong determination on both sides. And so I've been praying that it doesn't turn into a bloody civil war there or in America, because I've been asking the Ukrainians to pray for America because the tensions are growing stronger and stronger here as well.
Yeah, so you're seeing some parallels about where Ukraine is headed and where we as a country might be headed ourselves.
Definitely, yes.
One last question, Rick. Tell us how people can get hold of your book. Talking with Rick Deighton of Overseas Outreach. The book is More Than Conquerors in Cultural Clashes. Where can people find out more information about your ministry and get a copy of the book?
Okay, it is at the printers now, and Overseas Outreach, our website right now is not functioning, but our email is, so it's overseasoutreach@earthlink.net, so just at earthlink.net, or I'm an associate evangelist with Whitefields Overseas Evangelism, and with Bruce Malone's ministry. Bruce Malone's ministry is Search for the Truth, and he's the publisher of the book. He's published 2 more books for me before.
All right, Rick, listen, I really appreciate you taking time to be with us, talking here with Rick Deighton of Overseas Outreach. You can reach him at overseasoutreach@earthlink.net. Good to hook up with you again, Rick. It's great to talk to you again. God bless you, and we will continue to keep the people of Ukraine in our prayers. Thanks again for taking time to chat with us.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
Focal Point AFR Talk will be right back in just 2 minutes.